everyone, and welcome to the 11th annual finals round of the Monmouth College Moot Court Competition. Before we begin our events tonight, I have a few words of introduction to the competition and some thanks to those who have made our competition possible. Our Moot Court Competition was founded over a decade ago by our very supportive alumni and friends of the college, Dan Cotter, Brad Narstedt, and Debbie Narstedt. They were joined shortly thereafter by another alumna of the college, Kate Cross. These four individuals have supported the Moot Court program both financially and through their volunteering to serve as judges in the preliminary round of our competition, which was held last Saturday. Without them, this program would not be possible. We are also very grateful for our judges who will be presiding over the case this evening. Our Chief Justice is the Honorable Andrew Doyle of the 9th Judicial Circuit in Illinois. He will be joined on the panel by Justice Elisa Nelson and Justice Andrew Stuckert. All of us are indebted to a number of individuals who help ensure that this program runs smoothly, and while I am unable to name everyone, Marnie Dugan of the Wackerly Center for Career, Leadership, and Fellowships deserves special commendation for her many years of hard work in building the Moot Court program. I would also like to thank Communications who choose to take part in this competition. We had 9 students participate in the preliminary oral arguments round this past week, of whom 4 advanced to the competition this evening. We also had 5 students participate in our legal brief writing competition, the winners of which will be announced along with the winner of the oral argument competition tonight. A few procedural notes. During the competition tonight, we ask you to please hold your applause until the end of the competition. If you have not yet done so, please silence any phones or electronic devices as well. And consistent with the Monmouth College COVID protocols, we ask that everyone, including our presenters, keep your masks on and over your nose as much as possible. I will shortly introduce the case and our competitors, and then use the traditional cry of the United States Supreme Court to begin the competition. The case before us this evening is the United States of America v. the National Association for Scholastic, Collegiate, and Academic Rights, Incorporated. Based on the 2006 Supreme Court case, Rumsfeld v. Fair, this case involves the constitutionality of the Solomon Amendment, which would withhold federal funding from any institution of higher education that would prohibit military recruiters on campus. The law schools here sought to deny access to these recruiters due to the U.S. military's now former policy known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which barred any openly gay, lesbian, or bisexual persons from serving in the military. The case addresses the following issues. 1. Whether the Solomon Amendment violates the respondent's rights as an expressive association under the First Amendment, and 2, whether the Solomon Amendment violates the respondent's rights under the compelled speech doctrine. The petitioners are representing the United States of America. This argument will be presented by Gabriella Peterson and Grant Miller. The respondents are representing the National Association for Scholastic, Collegiate, and Academic Rights, Incorporated. This argument will be presented by Matthew Datloff and Owen Manny Davies. Please rise. The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Oyez, oyez, oyez. All persons having business before the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court.
Thank you. Be seated, please. On behalf, I don't recall if there was a calling of the case, so today we are hearing the National Association for Scholastic, Collegiate, and Academic Rights, Incorporated, as the plaintiff appellant, the United States of America, as defendant appellee. On behalf of the NASCAR Incorporated, are you ready to proceed, Mr. Miller? excuse me, I'm looking at the cover for the original appeal, with the United States of America. Mr. Grant Miller, you prepared to proceed?
Yes, my colleague will be proceeding first, but yes.
Okay, and Ms. Peterson, are you ready? Would you like to take the, stand there? Whenever you're ready.
Your Honors, I am Gabriella Peterson, representing the United States of America. At this time, I would like to please reserve 1 minute for rebuttal. The Solomon Amendment requires institutions that receive federal funding, such as law schools, to allow military recruiters access and equal treatment. The First Amendment rights of the law schools that are part of the National Association for Scholastic, Collegiate, and Academic Rights Incorporated, NASCAR, are not violated by the Solomon Amendment. Particularly, the Solomon Amendment does not compel any form of speech from the respondents. The Solomon Amendment is essential to Congress's enumerated right from the Constitution to maintain and raise an army. Compelled speech may be present in 3 categories of government action: subsidization, propagation, or accommodation.
Ms. Peterson, how is this not, one of those forms of compelled speech when the tying of, federal funds is, requiring these law schools to allow military recruiters to be present?
Federal funds are a prerequisite for the law schools because the Solomon Amendment asks that the military recruiters be allowed on campus to have equal access and treatment to the law school students. So the funds are an incentive for the recruiters and law schools to be in harmony on campus. The Solomon Amendment doesn't compel the law schools to subsidize, propagate, or accommodate the message of the United States military by simply having recruiters on campus receiving the same treatment as the other employers.
But Ms. Peterson, wouldn't it be doing exactly that, propagating a message that embodies what the United States military stands for?
Forcing law schools to disseminate a particular message would be considered propagation. According to the district court, the Solomon Amendment does not directly require a private speaker to participate in the dissemination of a particular message.
Well, isn't ultimately our decision whether it is propagation of that speech, not the district court?
Correct. However, propagation, making a big deal about excluding a certain group from the military, is not on the agenda of the recruiters, nor are they present to enforce that specific message of the military. The military recruiters are like employers from any other organization because their institution has a set of values. Other employers' policies are not being policed by the law schools, and unlike other employers, the military has a constitutional mandate to carry out its duties to maintain and raise an army.
Well, isn't it true, though, that the idea behind the law schools' concern with the Solomon Amendment is the fact that they can exclude private employers who they just believe that their views are not in what the law school wishes to express to its community?
Since 1990, the American Association of Law Schools has included sexual orientation as a protected category from discrimination. So while the military's policy is different from theirs, the military's policy should be given deference because of the government's urgent and compelling interest, which is one of the reasons why the government passes the strict scrutiny test.
So are you conceding that it is subject to strict scrutiny as it is a compelled speech?
So even if there were to be an alleged First Amendment violation, that's considered a small intrusion on the law schools, even if there were to be a violation, which I'm aiming to prove that there is not based on the lack of subsidization, propagation, and accommodation. With that being said, any alleged First Amendment violation is insignificant in comparison to the intrusion on Congress's ability to ensure military preparedness, which is ultimately extremely relevant in today's political society and necessary for the future of our country. Therefore, the law schools are not arguing that other employers with potentially questionable values are forcing them to propagate a message from those employers. They're specifically targeting the military, which has a duty to the United States. There is no permissible nor compellable inference that military presence on campus to recruit generates an immediate impression of discriminatory institutions. The respondent may cite Hurley v. Irish American Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Group of Boston, which does not serve as an appropriate precedent to support their argument. In this case, a group was not allowed to march in a parade for the purpose of conveying a public message because a state accommodation law could not be constitutionally applied to compel their participation. This case differs from our situation because parades are expressive, and recruiting is much more transactional than expressive. Recruiting is for instrumental employment reasons only, not to express the values of an institution.
Ms. Peterson, can you tell me then how a law school is not defined as an expressive institution?
The petitioner and the respondents both concede that in some ways the law school does have means of expression. However, the military recruiters being on campus will not be seen as part of the law school's own message because the schools will publicize their disagreement with the military's policies as they are doing right now with this case.
So does the Solomon Amendment give them any parameters by which they're allowed to publicize this disagreement?
So the Solomon Amendment does not contain a disclaimer or need one because the law schools have already made their stance of employment discrimination well known due to the American Association of Law Schools including sexual orientation as a protected category from discrimination. Additionally, there's no evidence of any case where a congressional act supporting the military has been declared unconstitutional by application of this doctrine. The government may not deny a benefit to a person on a basis that infringes his constitutionally protected interests, especially his interest in freedom of speech, in Spicer v. Randall. The military's ban on homosexuality is also constitutional, according to Reichenberg v. Perry. Moreover, the majority in the Court of Appeals decision never identified or discussed the many provisions of the Constitution that support the military derived from the enumerated powers. Congress's interest is in providing for the common defense and to raise and support armies, both of which the Solomon Amendment greatly assists with. This relates to how the Solomon Amendment passes the strict scrutiny test because of the government's compelling interest and narrowly tailored requirements. The government's compelling interest is how the preparedness of an all-volunteer military is essential to the welfare of our nation. The Solomon Amendment is narrowly tailored because the presence of the military recruiters is non-invasive and identical to that of other employers. All the Solomon Amendment requires is access to campus and equal treatment, both of which are minutely impactful on the law schools.
Can there be equal treatment under the Solomon Amendment while keeping military recruiters apart from any other portion of other employers' access in a situation where they are given equal access to students for employment akin to a separate but equal?
I don't see why that would be a problem as long as the military recruiters are receiving equal treatment. Separation isn't a condition covered in the Solomon Amendment. To conclude, deference should be given to the government of the United States because the enumerated powers are more important than the alleged First Amendment violation, in which we discovered that no speech is being compelled from the law schools. Your Honors, we respectfully request that the court reverse the Court of Appeals decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Mr. Miller? Take the podium. When you're ready, you may proceed.
May it please the court, my name is Grant Miller and I represent the petitioners in this case. The Solomon Amendment requires the Department of Defense to deny federal funding to schools of higher education that prohibit equal military access to recruiting as any other recruiters. The National Association for Scholastic, Collegiate, and Academic Rights is challenging this on the basis. In this case, I will be focusing on the precedent set in Boy Scouts of America v. Dale and the three-pronged test that the court has set for these cases in the past. The 3 points in this case are, The three questions asked in this case are, first, is the group an expressive association? On this, both sides agree that the law schools in question are expressive associations. Second, the second question is the ability for the law schools to advocate their viewpoint in this situation. Third, the third question is whether the government interest outweighs any burden placed on the organization. And in this case, we argue that yes, the government has a compelling interest to raise a military that outweighs any burden placed on the law schools in question. I will first discuss the second question in the Dale test. The government does not affect the ability of these law schools to advocate for their viewpoint. They do not put any restrictions on the ability of the law schools to express their viewpoint. They don't have to pay the military recruiters that are coming in. They don't have to change the members of their school. They're always able to express their dissatisfaction with military policy, and in particular with the don't ask, don't tell policy that the military employs. The only issue that they have to address is whether they have their recruiters on campus, but this does not affect their ability to freely express their opinion on military policy and in particular the don't ask, don't tell policy.
So, Mr. Miller, where's the line? How far can they go to freely express their displeasure with the military's don't ask, don't tell policy? Because in some form, isn't that discriminatory?
Discriminatory against the military's don't ask, don't tell policy?
Oh, isn't the military's policy itself discriminatory?
It's not up to the law schools believe that the policy is discriminatory, but the law schools are not being asked to express their belief in that, express that they support that policy. They're not being asked to show that they believe in that policy. They are only being asked to allow the military recruiter to be on campus. So
Effectively being, is that they're allowing of the military on their campuses to express, for the purpose of recruitment, when they would not allow a private entity that had these same discriminatory practices to appear on their campus. Isn't that, in fact, a way that this can be viewed as them acquiescing to this type of speech?
the reason that the military should receive deference in cases where other law firms should not receive the same treatment if they have the same discriminatory policies is because the government has a compelling interest to raise a military, to raise an army and a navy as expressed in the Constitution. This means that under the strict scrutiny test, which I concede should be applied here, there is a compelling interest for the government to raise an army and a navy, and that outweighs the small burden on NASCAR or on the law schools to allow these recruiters to be on campus. So so that's my point. Secondly, I will now discuss the third question in the Dale test, whether the government interest outweighs the burden on the law schools, as I previously touched on. The government does have a compelling interest in raising and maintaining an army and a navy as expressed in the Constitution. This is a very important property that the government must fulfill, and it outweighs the relatively minor burden on the school, which is bringing in the recruiters, letting them have space in the recruitment area, and allowing them to recruit students on campus.
This is going to be narrowly tailored, specifically in regards to the law schools. Why do the law schools, why are they required to provide their resources, like their staff, et cetera, to help this government interest? Why can't them just allow them to be on campus enough?
That is not enough because they need equal, in order to satisfy, it is narrowly tailored because they're receiving the same recruiting as everybody else. And the Army and the Navy need access to as many recruiting resources as possible. While that is the narrow tailor of this case, is that they are using it specifically for recruiting and in particular, only for transactional purposes, not for any expressive purposes. So while they do need equal access to the resources as any other recruiters, this is a narrow tailor because they are only using it for recruiting and a transactional purpose. They are not using it for any expressive purposes or forcing the law school to express themselves on the issue of don't ask, don't tell.
Are you effectively asking us to weigh powers in raising an army, outweigh the First Amendment?
I'm not asking that. Well, there's always a balance, and that is what the strict scrutiny requirement comes to, is that the First Amendment cannot always outweigh the need to raise an army and a navy, and the need to raise an army and a navy cannot always outweigh the First Amendment. There is some balance. And in this case, the burden on the law schools is not significant enough. The burden on their First Amendment rights is very insignificant. And in this case, because the government has such a compelling interest to raise a military, that compelling interest outweighs the insignificant burden on the law schools.
But isn't, they're saying that this is one of the core beliefs, that they're being discriminatory towards homosexuals, and they're not allowing that type of discrimination on campus. So if this is touching on one of the core beliefs, how is that the most narrowly tailored that possibly can be?
Can you rephrase that question?
Sure. Saying that in order, the whole thing here is that has to be as narrowly tailored as possible. And like, what we're looking at here is the law school is saying that it's one of their core beliefs, they're putting on paper that you cannot discriminate against homosexual people. And so how is it as narrowly tailored as possible if this is going against one of the core beliefs that the law school espouses?
Thank you. It's narrowly tailored because, as my colleague said, the recruitment is purely transactional. There's no expression happening from the recruiters, and so there's no, the point of the recruitment is not their difference in the core belief between the law schools and the military. It's purely transactional. It's purely to hire people for jobs. It has nothing to do with the difference in core beliefs of the military and the law school.
Does this have a different analysis that you believe we should apply at times of war versus times of peace?
I don't feel qualified to answer that question at all. In-person recruiting is also very important, and in particular, or I argue that our client argues that while in-person recruiting has not been shown to be more or less effective than other forms of recruiting, the United States government needs to recruit in any way possible in order to receive the best possible candidates to raise their army and navy. Because of this, we argue that this case passes the Dale test, and we respectfully request that this court rule in favor of our client. Thank you.
And on behalf of the respondents, Matthew Della. May I proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. My name is Matthew Datloff, and on behalf of the respondent, I will be addressing the compelled speech issue. At the heart of the First Amendment lies the principle that each person should be able to decide which ideas and beliefs propagated.
How is it promoting that message when they're just allowing them access to facilities?
Well, many of the law schools, and actually almost all the law schools virtually, are coordinating with the employers by coordinating their interviews, counseling the employers in effective recruiting tactics, stuffing the students' mailboxes with flyers about the employers, and printing employee announcements. So they have to assist in getting the government's message out there and that they're on campus. And we argue that recruitment is expressive in this case because of the nature of the policies that the government has. The law schools since the 70s, 80s, and 90s have taken a very stark opposition to this policy. And as a result, it is an ideological policy and it's quite controversial. And even if they don't want to express it outright, it comes with them being there, especially in the times of which students are now more hyper aware of inequities in society. They're much more likely to know that the government does not allow homosexual people to serve in the military.
But counsel, isn't this different than Barnett? I mean, Barnett is saying, you can't force somebody to say, under God in the pledge, or can't salute the flag. That is a very clear demarcation
and the spoken word be treated almost equally in this case, because the law schools have to treat them equally, given that they do make flyers for other employers, they make flyers and they help them do other things. They are expressing some speech in that way, so yes, it may not be spoken directly what the government policy is, but they have to endorse them and they have to promote them, and that you can misattribute the government speech with the law school speech in this case.
How can we legitimately say that a law school, which presumes recruiter coming in, that is a law school speech and not the speech of the recruiter?
Respectfully, we argue that we wouldn't give that much credit to the law students, especially because a lot of them are 1Ls, and they haven't taken that many law school courses. And they're probably not aware of the Solomon Amendment, that the government is forcing themselves onto our campus because it's, kind of niche policy, in the lexicon of law, and especially in, your less educated students would probably not know the Solomon Amendment at that point. But they do know when there's inequities in society, especially in today's societies, people are more sensitive to social inequities. So they probably do know that the military has this policy, but they probably don't know that the military is forcing themselves onto campus, and the law school can't do anything about it. So
Well, can't the law school absolutely has the right to not allow those recruiters on campus? It just has a consequence that they are not entitled to federal funds under the Solomon Amendment.
yes. However, that is now compelling us because all institutions need federal funding. If most institutions lost their federal funding, they'd be unable to operate. And so they've given us a very bad choice. It's either endorse their speech and their message and violate our First Amendment rights, or go out of business. We don't think the court should tolerate a choice given to us like that.
Isn't that, Counsel, are you familiar with our opinion in South Dakota v. Dole?
Yes.
How is this any different than us upholding that, under the spending clause condition, that if they wanted federal funds, the state of South Dakota had to adopt a, age of, 21 for consumption of alcohol?
I don't think Dole is analogous because Dole says that you can incentivize. And the question in Dole is, can the government withhold 3% of the funding? In the Solomon would withhold all funding. So that's coercive, not incentivizing. So the government can incentivize, the federal government, but they cannot coerce entities and people to act in the manner they want. Also, under this court's accommodate the speech, even if you don't accept that we have to propagate the speech, we do have to accommodate the speech. And in Hurley, a state non-discrimination statute could not be constitutionally applied to require parade organizers to include a contingent of gay marchers behind their own banner.
The military cannot also tell the law school, you don't get to say this or that, right?
Yes.
You would have the right, the law school would have the right to say, create these flyers and handouts that you've discussed and put them in every 1L's mailbox that says, we do not support the military of the United States.
Well, in most cases, actually, the law school does that. And if we treat the military any different, then we would have to start our practice of assisting employers that we want to employ our students to accommodate them. And there's also a big difference here, is that in Hurley, the court determined that it wasn't the fact that they couldn't be in the parade, it's that they were going to march under their own banner. And we believe that's analogous here as the law school, the military, whether they like it or not, are under their own banner and they cannot get away from that. And
Yeah, but wouldn't Exxon Valdez, for example, be under their own banner if they came into the law school to recruit for their legal department?
Yes, but we can deny Exxon Valdez if they have policies that we disagree with. We cannot deny the federal government in this case. So they're not exactly equally situated in that way.
Counsel, do you believe there's any, distinguishing of Hurley based off the fact that that was challenging a state, statute rather than a constitutional, issue that the petitioners brought up?
Well, the 14th Amendment does apply the Bill of Rights to the states. So if that case concerned a state interest or the federal government's interest, we still believe that there's not much of a distinction. It's still the same constitutional question regarding the First Amendment and compelled speech. We also want to make the point that page 11 of the lower court's opinion does recognize that the law schools have to tolerate the speech, and it is actually spoken that students have come in to interview with the military who are LGBT, and were told they could not be part of the military. And now, not only is now the speech spoken, it's now in our form in which we do not want it to be. And we also believe this law cannot pass strict scrutiny. Possibly, the government does have a compelling interest to have lawyers to raise an army, but it's not nearly tailored. The government has more resources than any other entity in the world. The United States government can essentially have a very broad variety of things they can do to achieve their ends, and they haven't exhausted those alternatives. They have just said, we have to come onto your campus to achieve our alternatives, but we also live in an internet age in which there's many different avenues for people to reach out to people, connect to people. We're a very interconnected world, unlike 40 years ago. For the aforementioned reasons, we respectfully request that this court affirm the decision of the 14th Circuit. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Maine Davis, are you prepared?
Yes, Your Honor.
You'll take the podium. When you're ready, you may proceed.
Mr. Chief Justice, may it please the court, my name is Owen Manny Davis. I represent the respondent in this case, and I will be arguing the expressive association issue. As a representative for the National Association for Scholastic, Collegiate, and Academic Rights, herein known as NASCAR, I allege that the Solomon Amendment does in fact significantly impact the ability for law schools to express their own viewpoint, and thus is a violation of their First Amendment rights. The United States labels freedom of speech as one of the most fundamental rights for all citizens. Yet the Solomon Amendment is a flagrant violation of NASCAR's right to free speech. While both the petitioners and respondents agree that the U.S. government does hold a compelling interest in this case, the Solomon Amendment is not narrowly tailored and thus fails any strict scrutiny test. The U.S. government can and should explore other avenues for recruiting before requiring law schools to express their message unwillingly and violating their right to free speech. In fact, the government could attempt several other methods which may have even more success without restricting the free speech of these expressive associations. There is no evidence to suggest, even anecdotally so, that recruiting via direct law school access has ever had any success. The U.S. government could and should consider further TV, radio, poster, other varieties of advertisements, off-campus recruiting, and a variety of other tactics.
But counsel, can't the law school then, if they prevail here, say that we are not going to allow said advertisements to appear anywhere, and in effect block them by internet, by TV, by ads?
Well, the Solomon Amendment requests equal access, so if these posters are to be administered for other organizations, they should be administered for the U.S. military as well. As far as restricting it via online mediums, they don't really have much of a right to do that. We live in a country where the internet is fairly unrestricted.
This type of recruitment?
Well, they could, but because they would have to then share the message that they do not like the U.S. military, they are again being made to propagate a message that they may very well not want to do so. They may disagree with the U.S. military's product, but they don't necessarily want to share that. And if they have to share posters that are against the military, to go against what has been shared for them recruiting, then they would be doing the same thing. They would still be being forced to propagate a message that they may not want to share, which is ultimately a violation of their right to free speech.
What if the law school takes this a step further and decides they're not going to allow members of the military into their school?
Well, then the law schools would lose funding, which is completely unfair to them, and they would lose their ability to operate as an institution, which affects their ability to advocate their viewpoint, which again is a violation of their right to free speech. Instead of devoting endless time and money to pursue on-campus recruitment tactics, the U.S. military could easily pursue other options, as I have mentioned. It is entirely possible, even, that the Solomon Amendment has hurt military recruiting. A case like this garners national attention, and it's certain to show the military in a negative light when we're considering their don't ask, don't tell policy. Law students are cognizant of the U.S. military's policies and their attempts to squash free speech. That is more harmful to military recruiting than not recruiting at all, Your Honor.
Isn't that something that just can be expressed by the law school? Isn't our entire First Amendment jurisprudence based on the idea that more speech is better than less speech?
Of course, but they'd still be being forced to share that they maybe disagree with the U.S. military, which again is a message that they do not want to have to propagate, and they're being made to propagate that by the Solomon Amendment, otherwise they lose federal funding.
But correct me if I'm wrong, the Solomon Amendment doesn't require them to say anything. It just requires that these recruiters be allowed to come onto campus and be afforded whatever services any other employer is given. Isn't that purely a conduct that is being asked to be done and has nothing to do with actual speech?
Well, when the law schools distribute messages, flyers, etc. for other employers, they're being requested to do that under the equal treatment for the U.S. military. Ergo, they're being requested to share a written message at this point, which is a propagation of speech.
But isn't that still a message of the recruiter or employer?
Not necessarily. If it comes from the campus career center, for example, then it would have campus labeling on it, perhaps the institution's name at the bottom and a contact person. That, at that point, becomes a message that has been distributed by them.
Would it not be fairly simple just on any disseminations from the career services department of the law schools to just indicate a disclaimer that for all entities that this does not reflect their views, this is the views of the employer?
They could do that, but again, then they're having to share a message that they maybe do not want to share. They perhaps do not want to have to disclaim or add that extra portion of text at the bottom. Law schools are expressive associations and thus have every right to express their own beliefs without infringement from the U.S. military. Every component of a law school's operation is expressive. The curriculum, the professors, the administration, even their entry requirements are expressive. There's a clear inculcating of a message by the law schools here. They hold their own individual philosophies and beliefs, which are disseminated among their student body. Any clause which forces the law schools to change or omit a message is in violation of their right to free speech. The Solomon Amendment forces law schools to share the message that they accept employment discrimination by the U.S. military as a fair practice, which is in fact not the opinion of most of these law schools. By allowing the military on campus, the law schools are effectively endorsing the U.S. military's discriminatory hiring practice. The U.S. military's don't ask, don't tell policies are archaic. They do not fit with the standard operating procedure of most law schools who promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Consider the case of Boy Scouts of America versus Dale. In this, the dissent holds that the state law that prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation could not be used to require the Boy Scouts of America, an expressive organization, to accept an openly gay scoutmaster. The petitioners reject the Dale case, but it easily applies to NASCAR. There's an expressive association in the law schools, and then there is a law which requires such expressive association to admit a U.S. military, a conflicting organization, onto their campus to share their message. Just as the Boy Scouts of America could not be required to allow a homosexual individual who shares a message completely contrary to theirs into their organization, a law school represented by NASCAR cannot be required to allow the U.S. military, who again shares a message which is completely contrary to theirs, into their
Doesn't
organization.
it contrast with that case typically in that the Solomon Amendment is not requiring the law schools to have a military personnel as a dean or as any representative of that institution. It's merely asking for somebody to be able to come in and use their recruiting engine.
Correct, but their presence could still be deemed as a person on campus and could be easily equated to being an employee.
But wouldn't an assistant scoutmaster be more, not just a person, but you're looking at an authoritative figure, not just a random person that's allowed access to the group?
Perhaps. In that case, then let's consider the prongs that are noted in the Dale case. One is whether the group is an expressive association. There's a message to be shared, and since law schools directly inculcate beliefs, they're clearly expressive associations. Both parties agree to this point. Two, whether the state action affects the group's ability to advocate its own viewpoint.
All right, now I think you're miscategorizing there. I think the correct is that it has to significantly affect, not just affect it, it has to significantly affect it. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir. The U.S. military's don't ask, don't tell policy directly goes against NASCAR's diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoints, and thus allowing the U.S. military access directly affects the group's ability to advocate their point, because they're essentially saying that the military's don't ask, don't tell policies are acceptable. That's contrary to their initial message of inclusivity. The law schools represented by NASCAR do not approve of the U.S. military's discriminatory hiring practices. Requiring them to allow this onto their campus goes directly against their mission statement, which again promotes inclusivity and ultimately violates their right to speak, free speech. Third is whether the state's interest justifies the burden. The state's interest of recruiting via law schools is simply not enough to justify stripping law schools of their constitutionally protected right to free speech.
Well, isn't their interest in raising an army to protect the United States, not solely in just recruiting?
Correct, but they could do that in other avenues. The ability to raise an army and recruit JAGs, for example, does not necessarily have to come directly through the law schools. There are many other ways for the state to raise an army. Recruiting on law school campuses is not necessary. Those interested in working as an attorney for the U.S. military will do so. The on-campus recruitment does little to encourage them otherwise. However, knowing that the U.S. government will not even respect NASCAR's right to free speech may very well dissuade an attorney from working for the U.S. military.
Wouldn't that be a concern for the U.S. military, not for the law school?
Correct.
So how is that a interest that seems like it would be a negative interest to the U.S. government and their policy and the Army, but not a negative thing to be held against the law school?
But it is a point that the U.S. military should consider when they are attempting to require their recruiters on law school campuses, Your Honor.
Counsel, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're saying your position here is effectively the same position that was held in the Dale case?
Correct.
Okay. In the Dale case, we're dealing with Boy Scouts of America, right, where the leaders here are effectively employees of this institution, and they are wearing the same uniform as these boys in this institution who are probably somewhere between 5 and 6 years old up through high school, depending on the level that they're on. This is markedly different, is it not? We're in law school now where a military recruiter who comes onto a law school campus is going to be wearing a military uniform that I'm pretty confident a 1L, 2L, or 3L is gonna know is a military uniform and is not associated with Yale or Harvard or University of California or University of, Chicago.
I cannot speak to the military's garb when they are recruiting. However, I believe you are correct that they would be wearing an official military uniform. But law school students are given a lot of credit here. It is very possible that they may not be able to recognize that this person is not perhaps a member of an ROTC or some similar program in law schools and isn't a student or a faculty member of the school and is in fact a representative of the United States military.
Isn't that kind of tongue-in-cheek at your own recruiting practices for your law schools, that your students are not able to identify where speech is coming from? You don't have to answer that.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Dale case holds the court should give deference to the organization, and I argue the same should apply here. Deference should lie with NASCAR. NASCAR is an expressive organization. Their message has been impaired by the Solomon Amendment, and the amendment is not narrowly tailored. Consequently, we kindly ask that this court please side with the respondent and affirm the...
Ready for a vote?
Yes. Your Honors, representing the United States of America, we reiterate that speech is not compelled by the Solomon Amendment through subsidization, propagation, and accommodation. The Chief Justice raised an excellent point. Why must the military be on campus rather than alternatives? Justice Nelson raised an excellent point of how law schools could potentially destroy alternatives. We concede that although there's no quantitative evidence of the effectiveness of the military's policy, there is a qualitative difference between the alternatives and actually recruiting on campus because of direct and face-to-face interaction during this transaction. That relates how the status quo is narrowly tailored in addition to having an undeniable compelling interest, therefore permitting the Solomon Amendment to pass the strict scrutiny test. The first respondent contradicted himself when he conceded that there is a big difference between Hurley in this case, and we agree that there is a massive difference between a parade being an expression and military recruiters being on campus to proceed with a transaction for the interests of our country. There's additionally no propagation because of the highly publicized nature of this suit, in addition to the law school's anti-discrimination policy released by the schools in 1990, meaning that there's no need for the law schools to issue a disclaimer. The second respondent even admitted that this case has garnered national attention, and therefore we do not think that the law school students are ignorant enough to not be able to differentiate between the military's policy and those of the law schools.
But counsel, wouldn't it also be true then, if the military is allowed equal access, then the law schools are in effect propagating or accommodating their message, because they have to put their message, their flyers, their posters up, and there are potential for people to believe that that's a discriminatory message. Isn't that the same thing?
We do not believe that the presence of the military is automatically associated with promotion of the military's message. For example, my presence in a room isn't automatically stating my viewpoints. Therefore, the military's message isn't what's going to be printed or broadcasted on those alternatives, merely just the presence of the military recruiters. Deference should be given to the government of the United States because the enumerated powers given to the military in the Constitution are more important than the alleged First Amendment violation in which we discovered that no speech is being compelled from the law schools. Your honors, we respectfully request that the court reverse the Court of Appeals decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I believe that the court will go into deliberation and will return shortly.
All rise. We do have some food here. I'd like to take some.
Yeah, I love the boost for the government. Like, that's my art style. I love this kind of because I make those same points, so I have he doesn't pay any attention to that. I'm not waving at him. I'm waving at my mother. Yeah.
Hi, Mama Main Baby.
You should see him. Yeah, it's fun. It's a good time. I think we all should do it.
The original competition, usually there's 3 different rooms. Our sets are just ask questions.
Let's not figure that, but
I've never had them.
speak to your friend, find out. I can't speak first round of people. Don't you think? Don't you said something casual?
My short
I forget.
Dan, I don't know if you get through everything that you say because
You said the whole thing, so you're fine with that.
and they're out.
I hope we reject. First of all, Dale is not applicable because there is a big difference between a scoutmaster and a transient like military team. The posture of those two people are enormously different. And I went with the government's one. And I was like,
I'll have to tell Corey.
but I got it. First of all, they were invoking cases that are not part of this case, but I know South Dakota versus Dole, so.
No, when he's like, are you familiar with this? And he said, yes. I was like,
His facial expression jumped up his head. Because I know that case really well. I know there's a difference between taking all funding and 3% funding. There's a big difference. Because one is incentivizing the goals. Oh my gosh. I was like, no, thank God. No, Jeff, it was Dan Codd. Dan Codd. But there's 2 competitions, the oral and then there's the,
and then you're about to find out.
we'll see both. Those separate things, you didn't have to do it, but I didn't get so like writing.
I have no
and
idea.
speaking.
Oh.
Oh, because you're here? I'm gonna go talk to so many questions. Lord, stop.
Easy to convince.
Great. Really the joy.
Delivered on time, delivered right in.
At least he backed off on the last question.
I know.
Well, the third to finish there. Are you curious too? Yes. Because he made on paper. Because I looked over it on Worker, Simpson, like, he had a little like, so I think that might have just been a question.
It's fun, it's nerve wracking.
Yeah, well, and it's different because I've never really done something this before.
Yeah,
I've been in this
really good
for
professional.
and it's like, I know Dan, I don't know.
But like, I know it's saying it's a very different comfort level.
And then
She broke her finger
I
today.
broke my finger, but it makes me
They
feel
were much more direct. Questions much more legal based than they were like the other ones, so
in the eighth grade.
if you, like,
It's based on.
Yeah, they're, like,
Yeah, this is for don't ask, yeah, don't ask, don't tell policies.
and I slammed the desk over there.
Which, basically,
it's so weird. The law school.
you have to asking about it, we're not.
They have some television.
But you tell them you're not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like I said,
So I was like,
it's open, so.
this is where I take,
Discrimination.
so that's what you sit down.
Which is why the entire
They said, yeah, we want to do this.
So that's why they say, they're going to
So the law, I mean, it's not really the most resources.
an endorsement when they also.
No, he was, I think he, Russian military is existing, so he was like,
So.
GDI, that's what it was.
What'd you say?
I just think it's funny they're sending it back on Friday for the. They already can't be paid. Give them a day off, then bring it back on short Friday.
I'm assuming.
It's a conversation with justice. You know, yes, we're in some ways. I'm pretty sure she was good problem.
Yeah, they were very funny. It was, yeah, great. It was great. She was saying, stop. Yeah.
Because she,
Exactly, yeah.
racing and she saying something along those lines. I feel like one of the things she's trying to do now. I just like this passion. I think they might not take that out. If I wasn't. That's true. I went last night to Jake, I spent $9. The bartender kept giving me free drinks.
I do know it is.
Teresa, Texas.
I saw Sam there. He said it $4 because it's $1.
I know two more little people that have sauce.
No,
So many drinks. So yeah, one shorter. Well, I'm the college. Yeah. He gave me constant. I left him in the door.
I feel like you guys are having.
We're all very different.
Oh, yeah.
Teresa came into the beach.
I heard y'all got jokes.
But I'm almost like a kid from the Jungle Book. He's like, yeah, he's like, and then he like, he's all these things. Oh yeah, we're going to do it. Right, I know. That's like.
Things like this is the next one.
She's gonna be like, well, since you're a delivery guy. Read. Real stuff. I keep my mask up, let that coke. That's what I like. Why do it?
My moving date for Travis. They are clean.
I've been telling my house first.
Provide new ones.
And then people just break.
I was very happy. It's expensive to work, you know, I was like, very good. Thank you. That's not a case within our breach.
I haven't seen them. I worked in about 2 or 3 weeks. I work Friday, I'll let you know if I'm seeing it. Maybe the
I was
alumni.
gonna say, when he said that, I said, that was a very different.
Is that actual marble?
I was so happy. But this is one of the benches I've actually, the finals last year was. I love watching. Talking about what you like and that's, I just got to hold, and let them take me where they want to go.
No, Frosty was still going.
And then the other three, right, I wanted the finals, and I wanted to last year. They were tires, they said, "Oh, just win the three, I won the three." I knew, I wanted to say, "They're just gonna keep me to check." But it was nice, my mom, my grandmother, my family, everybody got to walk. Yeah, my mom didn't work. Well, my grandma. I wish I was there.
Moseying around, feels like it.
I wish I was their age, grew up the way they didn't see the world change.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Like, I don't know if it was the world change if they did.
You think Josh would make it into
That's not true. I've never heard of it.
I wasn't expecting it to be like.
I feel like I waited like some months.
Really chaotic.
Yeah, I think, right, I think, right, yeah, sometimes I feel like that But once I got it, I feel like my problems are a little.
I didn't realize how much he really did.
Did you see Western Illinois beat Nebraska last night?
Yeah. I was.
Harry said 11 points.
We were watching it. We saw his story after they won. They were in the locker room. It was like Croatian sensation, and it was the Croatian guy who missed the game winning three. And I was like, no way. And so we like got on the ESPN and we looked and we were like, no, they actually did. And then we saw the shot and we were like, that's like a wild shot. He was like from that three. He was like got the ball. It was like the first time. His head after your like.
You got way too much.
Really good guys. Just shoot. These kids are so now that we're losing to Western, you know, as much as we think, does not look as bad. Yeah.
They're delivering.
I saw that.
Guy got fouled, took a lead, they come down with 3 seconds and make a
Make a
little
cheap
layup.
layup. And then UK lost last night.
I've never been a UK fan, so they stole 2 assistant coaches from the shoe by. So I hope they lose every game.
It almost
I guess.
What I was interested in, or like what I found
Kind of far to see for the 2.
like, I found the things that I could understand.
I don't think they did that.
You just like use
Over the last year.
well, you got a ton of transfers, so you got so many transfers. I think he wanted Kobe, but I think for Bell.
Yes. He was out, but he's kind of wish that I was better like Chris Frazier came back.
I like
They got it.
Oh, I probably would too, but I'd be interested in trying to get paid back. I'd be really interested in seeing why I didn't wait for this or whatever. See how well I know the case.
No, just see how well. Part of me wonders how.
I'm good at having my phone camera, but I don't necessarily good at carrying it. I think I'm you're here.
A lot of role players.
Correct as a person.
Georgia
I-
B.
I have to have certain
Yeah.
kind of preferences that
The
go
Greek
ask.
Oh, Georgia.
I think that gets back to how well you know the crowd because if you know
I think he signed a two-way contract.
like if
Denver or something. He's playing for the Nuggets in the G League or
and
something.
you're not in I guess if that makes sense.
Kentucky guy.
I can see that.
West Virginia, Oscar Sheway. West Virginia, yeah. He's, he had the most rebounds in the JV by any Kentucky player in history last season.
So I think there's
19 offensive rebounds. We got Ty Washington, who's four right
I
player.
feel like I'm just trying to get some full
Samir Wheeler, who's roots with Georgia. Return Keon Brooks, Dante Allen.
I don't like know like the amount of work.
Kentucky guy.
For a while,
It all blurs because like I did Kentucky, Duke, Kansas,
especially
North Carolina.
just like
The blue bloods and then Kansas.
It's fair. I mean, you are.
It seemed like a bunch of, no, I mean, I don't like that, so.
You're an all
It comes with it. It seems like all that. So if you're in on the right, like that.
Yeah. He went to,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Like have like so much like kind of like text and slides to be like on your phone. I feel like
Makes sense.
I definitely
And then they hired Shot Smart, Texas.
although that being said, I've kind of been surprised in my ability to answer some questions. So maybe it's just your stuff.
Wheeler.
Sorry, y'all.
But then we also got some guys from state.
They just talked to the
Yeah.
wait, how do you feel like Orgo?
Yeah, Kelly Grady.
That's me, right?
I'm so glad I didn't record though. I took Analyt when I was a freshman. Well,
It was
just very mathy. You said it down there.
I took Analyt the fall.
something like that.
I took Analyt the fall of my freshman year because I tested out as
Chemistry, COVID year,
initially I was going to be a chemistry major.
and SEC was tough.
Well, I was going to be a math
Kentucky was picked to win.
but I also wanted to get the license.
Alabama lost all their firepower.
Wanted to get the
They lost
licensure
all those
and
guys
said,
that were putting
okay, I
up
guess I have to drop
ungodly
chemistry.
Arkansas.
And then I said, actually, I don't want the
Arkansas was
licensure.
Those two guys.
Auburn's still on the still in the doghouse. Pearl. No.
My toxic
It
trait
was
is that I
Tennessee,
think
and Tennessee was like, all right, you've done a little too much.
Yeah.
Kick him out.
like I can't keep saying everything.
Come on, let's go. Yeah.
My first exam,
I remember that Bruce Pearl team that put D plus
The thing is like that's right around average too.
Yeah,
Which is sad.
Whenever they get back,
Yeah.
Was it
You got in the game
Give us an
before.
North Carolina?
Yeah.
who won.
That was a cool year because they took down all the blue bloods.
You're welcome.
Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky.
that was an
And then the
exam.
other thing
I thought I was
good about that is like, Kentucky was
I felt
they go to the championship.
decently confident in the first
But
one.
that year was
Had
so
no
good.
confidence
That's why
whatsoever.
Virginia, that's
I
why
legit
Virginia won.
thought I won.
That's why
First
Virginia
one, I
won.
feel like I got multiple choice.
Well, they just lost last night. They lost to a terrible team.
Philly really gets by.
I thought, I felt
Yeah.
so uncomfortable on the multiple choice on the
They
second one.
scored 2
Like, I
points.
think I guessed on what they did this, and I got all my advice correct, which I don't know how. Like, one of the things I literally noticed, I did it the wrong way, but the way I did it wrong somehow gave me the
yeah,
right
that's fine.
answer. I
Because
was
it's,
like,
I
I
mean,
am
like,
so lucky.
You know, they'll win the
But then for the second one, I literally, because I always write
I got
questions
you.
to my
If you gotta
exam.
run,
First year,
So then on the second one,
the second one, I got like one.
It doesn't surprise me. But the team went into it, and then Mac takes over, and Mac has an assistant who
Reese is gonna start getting ready.
basically just like executed by the SEC. It was like, listen,
For what?
you're on probation, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
You will. So that's all.
And find your seats, we have all rise.
Thank you. Be seated, please. Okay, to all the advocates, I want to express our sincere pleasure to be able to serve in front of you this evening. You all did an excellent job, and actually all of us were amazed at your levels of your abilities, especially at this young age, relatively. You all have a great future ahead of you, and I encourage you all to work towards going to law school and pursuing a career in this profession. I know that all of us here have found it to be rewarding, and it's great to see young people like yourselves that are interested in it, that have the ability, the skill, and the desire to put the work in. I know that you all have a lot of activities, and you're involved in a lot of other things on campus and the rest of your lives, and spend extra time to come to the competition is extraordinary. We've been asked to provide a little feedback to each of the advocates here today, and that's what we're downstairs discussing. And so I'm going to try to give a point of criticism and a positive aspect to what each of you brought forward today. So we're going to go in order that you presented. So Ms. Peterson, I'll start with criticism. That was in on a good note. And this is very, very minor, but I think it's important, and we all noticed it. And I think it goes to not only following instructions, but also embracing the traditions, the formality that's associated with the institution of the courts. And that you did not address as and ask if it would please the court before you started in your argument. So while that may seem very trivial and minor, I think that I guess all of us noticed it, so it stood out to us as not having fully understood the instructions or complied with the instructions. But really, that was, I mean, if we're picking out little things like that in the overall scheme of things, you did a great job. I think the thing that impressed all of us the most was in your rebuttal, the way that you took pieces from not only what Ms. Nelson stated in the question she asked, but also I think maybe from all of the other arguments, and you incorporated that into your own, either you compared or contrasted it. I think that was very powerful. It was a great ending, and we were very impressed with that. Good job.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, initially my criticism of you was that I asked you to go and then you told me no, and then switched over to Ms. Peterson. But your professor told me that was the order that he told you to go in, and so I got overruled there. So, never argue with the court. But that's not my criticism, because I got overruled. Our criticism was that you got stuck on a couple of questions, and that could be our fault to an extent, because maybe some weren't as clear as it could have been. But I think the takeaway for us was to be able to answer them succinctly, even if you didn't maybe understand the whole question. And then bring us back to your argument as quickly as possible. And, we thought that was maybe where you're lacking, is you dwelled on our questions a little bit, where you knew your argument. You had it in front of you, you had it well organized, but when you kind of got stuck, instead of bringing us back, you kind of were trying to think of how to maybe answer our question more than was almost necessary, so, but I think on the flip side, and this is why we wish you would have just gone back to your argument, we thought your argument was great, you were confident in your argument, you did a great job presenting that to us, and so kind of, again, that's why if you just came back to it a little bit quicker sometimes, we think that would have strengthened your delivery. Also, one of the things I would note was that you had great eye contact, which also led us knowing that you were confident in your argument and that you knew it very well.
Thank you.
So, again, good job. Mr. Datloff? Our main critique of you was, also in presentation. You did a great job, but you was so fast coming at us that, but it's not always about trying to cram as much in there as you possibly can. So, focus on quality instead of just the quantity, maybe. And I know when you get up there, you get excited and nervous and things come out a little quick, but, really that was the main negative. The positives were that you, brought us back after questions to your argument very well. And I was personally very pleased that you were able to correlate outside knowledge, I'll say, with the South Dakota case, and also how you compared and contrasted and brought in the 14th Amendment. So kind of bringing in a little bit of outside knowledge and being confident enough to assert that when it wasn't a lot of what was just in the documents that were provided. So again, excellent job. Mr. Manny Davis, and it's a common theme, I guess. Presentation again, so we went through all these. You spoke very quickly, which I thought worked halfway because Ms. Nelson was trying to get some questions in, but she couldn't get a breath in. You didn't take a breath and offer enough time to get it in. So maybe after seeing the other three go, that was a defense mechanism. And it worked for a little bit, but she was able to edge a word in there somewhere. The other thing that was distracting was, and I do the same thing, I talk a lot with my hands, but you're kind of bouncing around up there, moving your hands around a little bit, and so that tended to be a little distracting. So again, under presentation there. The positives were that you were probably the most confident in responding to questions. And so when we, obviously we're coming from all different angles, you addressed them one way or another, and you seem very sure of your answers, which is something that was great as far as the presentation and the responses go. The other thing, and again in answering the questions, is that you weren't confrontational when you were responding to us. You turned it more into a conversation, and that felt better for us because I know we'll work around questions that you it feels confrontational, but to kind of turn the tables and to kind of bring it down and relax everybody and show us that you're not fighting just us, you're more explaining to us, was a real good takeaway there. So again, excellent job. I guess I can't reiterate enough how impressed that we were with this group. So kudos to all of you for putting the time and effort and being to the winners of the legal brief writing competition. In third place, we have Miss Gabriella Peterson. In second place, Hallie Mozdich. And in first place, Matthew Datloff. And in regards to the top advocate for the oral arguments that were presented here tonight, another first place for him, Matthew Datloff. Congratulations, and we did not know that you were the first place winner of the legal brief writing, or else we might not have gave that one. No, we honestly, we did not know that you were the winner of that when we picked it, but excellent job. So it's very deserving as a senior and somebody who obviously, as Ms. Nelson said, a lot of times your brief writing directly correlates to your oral argument. And the more time you spend on that writing and the more knowledge that you have based on that, it transcends directly into your oral argument. So well deserved and not surprising at all to us that you won the brief writing as well. Again though, I think the takeaway for me, and we were having our discussion downstairs, is the negatives were so minor and they are all easily correctable, as opposed to, the positives and the things that you brought to the table as advocates today. It is really outstanding. So I think, again, continue to work on your craft, and we appreciate you being here and what you did, and again, we took great pride in being your justices this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate you being here for our 11th annual moot court competition. Thank you to our students. You all did a fantastic job. You've made us very proud. Thank you to our judges, and again, thanks to all of you for being here tonight. We're going to do a quick picture with the advocates here. So if you wouldn't mind kind of shifting over to this side of the room, there is some more food over here that you're welcome to partake in. Otherwise, have a